Well, good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
Welcome to Australia.
Thank you.
I know you've been here for a few days.
Yeah.
So I guess what we're doing here is to give Australian filmmakers a little bit of some tips, some ideas and some thoughts about the Toronto Film Festival. So it's great to have you here. I thought maybe we could start off by you just telling us a little bit about the film festival in general, perhaps its history, where it sits in the festival calendar. Not a long history.
No. Well, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary, so we've been around for a long time. We started as the Festival of Festivals 40 years ago, which was meant to be like an aggregator, a collection of the best cinema from around the world in any given year. And I think to some degree we still see ourselves as that, although our name has changed. The festival obviously has grown enormously over these years, and where we are in the calendar of the year in September, I think it serves us very well. We're sort of launching what is in North America, contrapuntally to Australia, the beginning of the cultural season. And we're in a good position to launch a lot of those bigger films that are probably going to wend their way into awards season. But more than that, I think those are very obvious, glossy things. But we're a very large festival. We show almost 300 films every year. We have numerous sections. Those are very important, everything from short films. We recently launched a television section called Prime Time. But we really see our mission as very much as the one that we had in the beginning, to bring the best of international cinema to one place in the world for a very particular and exciting 10 days, for Toronto audiences to see and for all of these industry folks to come from around the world and to enjoy and revel in all this cinema.
And it's worth saying, I mean, there's no secret, Toronto's probably at least in the big three of the festivals. If you think Cannes, the festivals schedule your Cannes, Toronto, Berlin, with possibly Venice and Sundance and some other, and Telluride obviously comes in there as well. But really you are part of that big three in terms of where the market tends to go.
I think so. I mean, each of those festivals are very important, but every festival has its own personality and audience that it serves and function within the calendar at a particular time. So I think we found our place in between all of those, as I say, at the beginning of the cultural season. But also we're able to not only world premiere a significant amount of films, but we can also cherry pick from things that have been in the 6 months to 8 months possibly before us, because people want to see those films. They're not like us, they're not lucky enough to be able to go to all of those big events.
As from a filmmaker's point of view, it's not essential that films have their world premiere at Toronto, but as long as they get the North American premiere, but each film sort of depends on how it...
Yeah, I mean, we really do like to have a minimum of a North American premiere, but you're exactly right. There's no way that we could world premiere 300 films every year. But not only that, you know, there's an entire cycle that takes place in the life of a film, in the launching of a film out into the world. And for us, really what premiere status does is it somewhat dictates placement within the festival. We're like all the other ones too. We front load a lot of our world premieres to the first half, but we are rolling films out every single day. And yes, that's not an impediment to being with us.
But in terms of those three markets, I mean, sort of top three festivals, if we like. It's certainly the case that Cannes and Berlin have formal marketplaces. Toronto doesn't have a formal marketplace, but it's clearly an important place for the market. Do you want to talk about how that's increasing as a role? Or?
Yeah, we don't have a bricks and mortar market, if you will, and that has always been our feeling, that we wanted people to spend their money on buying films. And but not only that, we like to think of ourselves as somewhat egalitarian in that regard. We think that producers and directors and buyers and sellers, they're going to find each other, and they know how to find each other. For us, really, there's an expression where the rubber hits the road. For us, it's in that cinema where we're presenting a film. We've got the filmmaker there, and we've got the audience there, and it's that experience that's going to sell a film. Yeah, and we have a significant number of sales happen at Toronto, a huge number of pre-sales, things happening in development. I actually had a conversation this morning with an Australian producer. We were talking about a film that he's just finished, and he said, well, so-and-so and the director, I met him at Toronto, and we didn't know each other even though we're both Australian, and now we're working together. And that's another function that festivals have.
So just tell me a little bit about, because you don't only cover Australia,
Yeah.
just maybe the other areas you do cover, just quickly the other countries, territories you do cover, and sort of what you're looking for when you're looking at those territories, the sort of,
Yeah.
in 3 words or less.
Yeah, can't do it. I cover Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Germany, and American independence. Very diverse range of things, but they're all fascinating territories, and they are, all of them, territories that produce a lot of film related to their size of their population. So I have a lot of work to do, but it's fascinating, and there's a couple of things that I look for. Part of it is getting to know the culture within those countries, and when I'm looking at the films, I'm looking for how the films reflect that culture and what the people in that culture are thinking about and what they're doing. Because that's an important thing when you are taking a film out of its domestic milieu and moving it onto the international stage. It has to have that scope so that an international audience will recognize it. It can't be so local that there's no way in for them. On the other hand, you do want it to retain a flavor of that from which it springs, you know, so it's a balance of these things that I'm really looking for. I'm looking for a distinctive voice. I'm also looking for something I haven't seen before, perhaps told in a way I haven't seen before. It's very difficult. Every film is an individual case, and that's why they all have to be looked at individually.
That is indeed why. But it is interesting that we've, there's been a strong connection between Australian films and Toronto.
Yeah.
Partly cultural, but also just seems that there is a kind of interest in the Australian films over the years. We've had quite a strong representation.
Yeah, I'm doing the bit for Australian film, but not only that, I think we do share a lot of things culturally. I think we're both Commonwealth nations. We both have shared aspects to our history. We both have similar attitudes to the rest of the world. You know, we're nations built on immigration, and we have a colonial history also that I think is examined more successfully in Australian film currently than in Canadian film, and that's something that's really interesting also. So I think we share those things. Yeah, and we have had a great representation. So I think that leads to why Canadian audiences are so warm to Australian film. We have, I know, audience members who come specifically just to see the Australian film. Absolutely. And whether they're expats or whether they're people who just love the work and can't have access to it any other way, that's very important. And we have a huge audience. We, you know, have over 450,000 tickets, bums in seats, repeat bums, but bums in seats every year. So it's nice for them to find things that they love that way.
Yeah, well, long may it continue.
Yes.
So you're talking about meeting with, it is interesting that what I've noticed about your work over the years has been the extent to which you're both looking at films, but you're actually continuing to have engagement with talent and with producers and so on, and those ongoing conversations. How do you manage that outside of actually just watching the films, and what are those conversations that you're having with those filmmakers?
Well, I think it's an important part of the role, although it is, yes, very time consuming, and sometimes I don't have as much time for it as I'd like. But it's inevitable. I can't personally sit back and coldly curate, as it were. These are works of art that are made by people, for people. So it's inevitable to me that one would get at least professionally and emotionally engaged with people. And I've been coming to Australia for 9 years now, as I was reminded yesterday. And yes, that's one of the best ways to continue to get the films that I want for the festival, is to have relationships with people. I naturally want to support them in any way that I can, those people who are working hard and doing work that I think, in whatever small way that I can, help launch them onto the world stage, if that's what they want. I want to help. And sometimes my engagement with people comes because I'm saying no.
Yeah.
And I try not to be a dream crusher,
Yeah.
but rather explain and say, look, it's not because the film's not good, but here's why it doesn't work for us. There's a million and one reasons.
Or if the film's not good, you might say these are the things you may.
Yeah, it's something to think about, and sometimes people are open to that and sometimes they're not, and it is just one person's opinion, you know. So again, going back to our earlier point about each film being bespoke, and you have to deal with each one on an individual.
You told me the other night about an Australian filmmaker who hadn't alerted you to a film. I mean, I'm just wondering, you're very encouraging of people, hadn't alerted you early enough and you were annoyed at them. Are you, but no,
well, because I loved the
pleasantly
film.
annoyed. I'm
I
not
was
saying,
pleasantly
not
annoyed.
saying
No, it was
angry.
true. Yes.
So you encourage people to contact you as much as possible, to be in touch with you about those, not to feel reticent about contacting you.
Absolutely not. And if I can't see something, or it's too late, or we're closed, or any of those things, I'll tell them. You know, film is a business in addition to all of these other things, and it's very important that people know I will always, I hope, deal with them, make every attempt to deal with them in a business-like manner. But it is also one where we have to work together. So if someone's got a film, I'm in the business of looking for the films, and so I need to find them. On the other hand, if it's not right for us, or I can't do anything for them,
direct them somewhere else, possibly.
Yeah, or even just say, look, not right for us, but keep on, or perhaps provide some advice about where else they might go.
Yeah, because you can actually suggest other festivals that might be good for them, or other strategies that might work for them.
Yeah, and I think a strategy is a really important word. Can I talk about strategies for a minute?
We can talk about strategy. You can run into strategies right now. Sure.
Okay, because I know people often feel that these top 3 festivals, or these international ones you've talked about, are the brass ring. But in actuality, in a conversation I had with someone the other day, I said, there's not one brass ring. Think of them as the Olympic rings, that there are a lot of rings. And some people have to think very, very carefully and strong and smartly, intelligently about a festival strategy for a film. And it's not something that they should start doing when, on the day they wrap. It's something that they need to start thinking about a lot earlier, because just launching at one of the world's big festivals is maybe not the right thing for every film. And they have to understand what it is that they have, know who the potential audience might be, and in concert with sellers, if they have a sales agent, all of that. And perhaps what I'm trying to say is they need to educate themselves about the world of festivals. And in this digital, multi-platformed universe in which we now live, it's even more important than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, if you're going to have any presence out there in the world, you have to know which way to actually find your way out to your audience.
That's true. And granted, not every festival may take your film, but you have to think about what you'd like ideally. It's just like making a film. This is the perfect scenario. Oh, and I'll expect to get knocked back once or twice, but then this is my plan B, and this is where we're going to go.
So you're a festival selector suggesting perhaps that festivals themselves aren't the end of the road for these films, which is an important lesson for the filmmakers.
No, absolutely not.
Because often we find that some filmmakers do think, well, I've got into Toronto or somewhere, and that's
job
enough.
done.
Job done.
Beginning of
That's
the job.
Beginning of the journey.
Beginning of the job. You've made a great film. It's in the festival. What happens now? There's so many things to think about. Filmmakers in Australia are really, really lucky to have the expertise that's here at Screen Australia and the support that might or might not be available to them. They have to know that that is not the case everywhere around the world. So first of all, I'd say everybody should have a little prayer of gratitude. But they need to prepare themselves and talk to people who have been to the festival before. That's really a great thing.
I'm going to come back to my 5 tips for actually going through the festival, but that we keep that one on hold.
That's tip 1.
But my thing, I just wanted to get quickly before we jump into that, and I know that all of your children are your favourite children, but do you have any favourite Australian films or experiences in launching Australian films that have been particularly good for you? And you don't maybe necessarily have to name specific titles, but are there particular moments that you've had that in film, and maybe it's not even Australian?
Yeah. Without naming titles, there have been films from every one of my territories over the years that have had a really big impact on me. And it's been for a couple of reasons. Because we want to give those moments to an audience. I need those moments, and I'm lucky enough to have had many of those moments. And it's often come where a film has been presented, it's almost always in the Q&A, because that's where that thing happens between filmmakers and audiences. Filmmakers who rarely get to be present when audiences see their films. It's another important role of festivals. So the feedback they get from the audience, what they're able to tell the audience about the film and the process is really important. But there are many times over the years, there's at least two or three incidents every festival where there's a moment where I know that something important has happened emotionally or intellectually to people in the audience, and it's also happened to the filmmaker. And I've seen someone find their legs on an international stage, and I think that is something special. You can see that they're stepping up, and that this has fed them, the filmmaker, and fueled them, and you know that they're excited now, the circle is closed.
And is there also, I mean, one of the things we find when we send films off, then you see a film that I love, like, for example, The Loved Ones, which goes off to Toronto and wins Midnight, wins the Audience Award at Midnight Madness. And those, not that we were surprised because we liked the film, but it is still sort of a surprise, and then suddenly that filmmaker suddenly kind of goes from in the darkness to suddenly out in the light. That must be a really exciting moment.
Yes, because when I'm making a selection, it's like, well, I love it. I hope everybody loves it as much as I do. Or I know that I've got an audience for it, or there's something special about it.
Or you've followed the filmmaker perhaps.
Exactly. You know, we really do try to present a filmmaker for, like a body of work. It's not always possible. Filmmakers' work is often up and down, and sometimes we are not the right place to launch it. But yes, there's always that moment where I feel a swell of pride, like, yay! And also too, but just, I'm in a privileged position to be able to give both the audience and the filmmaker, ideally, something special. And boy, it doesn't get better than that.
Doesn't get better.
It doesn't get better.
So now that we've gone through all of those, and you've done very well not to name any of your favourites, I'm going to ask you just quickly go back to your top tips. And I'm interested, basically, for filmmakers interested in coming to the festival, the tips they have other than make a brilliant film that just is amazing to you, how they contact you, but more importantly also, once they're at the festival, and we can talk a little bit more about the festival strategies, about what they need to do to actually maximise their leverage.
So I would suggest once they've been invited, there's a couple of things they need to do as far in advance as possible. And that would be talk to people who have been there before. And that would include any of the funding people that they're involved with. And I would hesitate to say, if they don't know anybody personally, make a call. I don't know anybody who would say, no, I can't talk to you about that. Make a call to another director, another producer, another actor, make a call. And try to make 2 or 3. Also to line up things like a publicist. That can happen later in the process, but and there are also people on the ground in Canada or in North America that are very helpful, but it's really helpful to have guidance around that. And when they get to the festival, there's a couple of things I would say. First and foremost, don't forget that the priority is the screening. Don't be late. Our staff will tell you everything you need to know. Follow the rules. They're there for a reason. Not that we've ever had anybody fall off the rails or anything like that, but don't get caught up in all the ancillary stuff that's happening around you. That's right there, that's ground zero. And the other thing I would say, because I see the opposite of it many times, just by people in general who come to the festival, it's large, it's overwhelming. Don't forget why you're there. And you should know why you're there, whether it's to sell your film, to present it to an audience, to make contacts with other people, to meet an agent. All of those things are critical. But I would see films. far too often I see people who go, oh, we went to this event and it was really, really great, and maybe I had a bit too much to drink, and then the next morning I didn't make that 10 a.m. screening and all of that.
Yeah.
See films.
Or spend an extra 2 days in Toronto or
Spend
3
an
days.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
because this is an extraordinary buffet that is not going to be available anywhere else. Granted, there are some amazing film festivals here in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide. You know, I mean, the list just goes on. But you're there, you've got a pass,
Yeah.
take advantage.
All right. And other than that, tips to get in, make a great film, but don't be reticent about contacting you. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can't spend a lot of time, I can't, but I'll tell you that. And we're all in this together. We're all here to make wonderful films and to move them forward and to develop and nurture the careers of artists. And
All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to go and let you watch more Australian films
Okay.
and talk to more Australian filmmakers.
All right.
And work you very hard. Thank
Yes,
you very much.
you do. Thank you.
Thanks.